G'day, I'm Cahn and this is my old Datsun ute. Now believe it or not, I used to daily drive this, but these days I basically just rip around the block using it for odd jobs, and because of that, it doesn't get driven for very far or for very long. And the battery has gone completely dead, which is fine. I've just been jump starting it, but it does get a bit frustrating if I need to turn the engine off because I'm doing something, or if it stalls or the engine dies, because you've got to pop the bonnet and get it going again. So I figured, I've got a bunch of batteries laying around, why don't I just slap a lithium battery in it and see what happens? And I reckon that's a pretty good premise for a video, because a lithium battery as a starter could either be a good or a terrible idea. Lithium cells themselves are typically more than capable of starting an engine because they can put out a whole lot of current, a whole lot of amps. And a good example of that is one of these small lithium jump starters, which can apparently do 1,000 amps peak. But bigger batteries like this, the bottleneck is typically the BMS. This battery, for example, can constantly output 120 amps, which is great for running a fridge or even an inverter, but when you're trying to start a starter motor on an engine, it's going to pull a lot more than that, particularly if it's a larger capacity engine or a diesel. Now, luckily, this is only a little 4-cylinder 1.8 litre, but still, the battery under the bonnet is rated at 650 CCA, which is 650 cold cranking amps, while this battery is only rated to a maximum of 360 amps for 5 seconds. So there's already a bit of a mismatch. But I'll bolt it in and see what happens before getting into some of the other possible issues. I'm also going to install a Victron smart shunt so I can measure what's actually going on and see how the poor little Datsun's charging system is holding up. I'm also going to have some tools handy, and I'm doing this outside so I can rip this out if anything goes wrong. And I might even duck down to the shops and get a new fire extinguisher. And in terms of size, the lithium, about the same width, same height, just a little bit longer. We'll see if it fits. All right, moment of truth. Let's see how it goes. Well, it started right up. Looks like it pulled about 120 amps of current for a second or two. How good is that? Fired straight up, even though it's pretty cold here. It's about 7 degrees ambient and it feels like -1 according to the weather app. So the fact that it fired up straight away is pretty impressive. And if the video ended here, you'd probably think, perfect, this is a great idea, let's do it. But now we get to dive into why this is not a great idea. Now, while it was idling, let's take a look at what the alternator was actually doing, keeping in mind that this battery was fully charged when I put it in, so it shouldn't actually be pulling too much current. And that's exactly what we saw. It charged up to about 13.8 volts and topped out at around 7 amps of charge when I put my foot down a little bit. At idle, it was only getting 2 or 3 amps of charge. It seems fine, but this is where using a lithium battery gets a little bit interesting. With your standard lead acid battery, the charging current will taper off as it gets closer to full. But if you put in a lithium battery at a low state of charge, it can basically accept full current, as much as you can give it, for much more of that charge cycle. So basically you could end up asking a lot more from your alternator or your charging setup in total than it should be able to output, which means it's going to run for longer, much harder, and get much hotter. And basically you could cook your wiring or your alternator. Even if your alternator survived, the next big problem is heat. Heat isn't good for any battery, but particularly with lithium batteries, you need to be really careful. Most lithium iron phosphate cells should be charged at a maximum of around 45 to 50 degrees Celsius. And while there are some lithium starter batteries out there that might have higher protection limits or different BMS strategies that allow them to charge in higher temperatures, you can't really get around the chemistry of the battery. The chemistry suggests you shouldn't charge it above about 50 degrees Celsius or you will prematurely age the battery or potentially damage it. So in Australian summers, when you're talking about under bonnet temperatures, the temperature can be pretty brutal, which isn't going to be good for a lithium battery. So to get around that with a lithium battery, you could mount the battery remotely in the tub or in the back of the vehicle or underneath, for example. But that also adds new challenges. You need to run some pretty heavy duty wiring from the battery back under the bonnet. Otherwise you're going to get significant voltage drop. And remember, whether it's under the bonnet or mounted remotely, your battery is always connected to the alternator. So anytime you're driving, it's charging. And an alternator isn't a battery charger with a lithium charging profile. It's basically a voltage regulated source, and the battery will accept or take as much current as it can. Now that's not an issue with a lead acid battery. They're kind of set up for that in the sense that once they're full, they actually prefer to be trickle charged or have a bit of a maintenance charge to keep them topped up. And that offsets any of their self-discharge losses. But with a lithium battery, they don't like to be float charged if you can help it, particularly in elevated temperatures. All you're gonna do is cause premature aging or wear and tear on the battery. But probably my biggest concern is what happens if something actually goes wrong. And again, it all comes back to the BMS. What happens if the BMS disconnects because it hits one of its protection features like over temperature or over voltage or even under temperature? Basically, your battery is acting like a big buffer for all the energy flowing through your electrical system. So if it disconnects while your engine's running, that energy has to go somewhere, and that can cause some pretty big electrical problems. You're gonna get a big voltage spike that can go through your system and damage things like sensitive electronics or even your ECU. Not such an issue on a vehicle like this, but you still need to be aware of it. It's not something I want to deliberately test, but just imagine you were doing a river crossing or cruising down the highway and your battery suddenly disconnected. And then it gets even more complicated if you've got a more modern vehicle with a smart alternator, compared to something like this with a simple, standard voltage regulated alternator that just sits around 14 volts. A smart alternator might actually output up to 16 volts on purpose when you're decelerating to get heaps of energy back into the battery. And that's not ideal if you've got a lithium battery with a voltage cutoff at around 15 volts. Now, a standard lead acid battery wouldn't even notice it. If you had a specific lithium starter battery, it might be designed for that higher voltage input, but you can't really get around that lithium chemistry not exactly wanting those higher voltage spikes. And you could wear or tear the battery, cause premature aging, and reduce capacity yet again. So for me, I don't think slapping a standard lithium battery under the bonnet is a great idea. Yes, it'll start the engine and you can drive around, short trips, probably no worries, but the risks outweigh the benefits for me. But that did make me think, how are they actually designing lithium starter batteries to get around a lot of these problems? So I think that deserves another video. I might track one down and give it a proper test because I'm genuinely curious. Are they actually designing them differently, or is it just clever marketing? And if you read the fine print and actually look at the specs, are they not ideal either? As always, thank you everyone for watching, and massive shout out to all my channel members. I really appreciate it. I'm really interested if anyone has experience with lithium starter batteries and what they thought of them in the real world. So if you do, please drop a comment down below. If you've got any other suggestions, questions, or thoughts, make sure you drop a comment. I'm going to report back on how this goes, and I'll see you in the next one.